Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Mohamed. All praise is due for Allah, and peace and blessing be upon his last prophet Mohammed. We're at the last leg of the race here, and today we're going to be talking about mental health challenges for Muslims and conflicts of identity. And as you know, mental health issues are something that is a human issue. It's not something that is specific to Muslims or any other faith or population of people. So without further ado, I want to just get started because we have a lot of speakers that we have to get through and time is limited. I would like to actually first introduce Brother Bilal Ali, if he wouldn't mind coming up. He was a state of Maryland delegate. If you don't mind.
Thank you.
If you'd like
Is
to
this
sit
on?
here, you can.
Yep. Oh, okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful and compassionate. Being the only state legislator from Baltimore City, I know how it feels to be alone and ostracized. But the point that I want to make is this. First of all, I want to thank the TAME group because this is so necessary in that process of educating the public in general about what true Islam is all about. I think it has been a total miseducation about the fundamental tenets of faith of Islam, and I think we operate out of so many stereotypical ideas that this interferes with you getting or being able to connect with the person. I think the common denominator is we're all human. We all have shared values. I think language is so important because when you prescribe a certain adjective to an entire religion as opposed to decompartmentalizing behavior of individuals who may or may not embrace an entire faith. So I think the takeaway today is we have a mess that we hope there's a message that you take away from here today and better understanding that people do not represent Islam. And what I mean by if an individual does something that we know is contrary to the fundamental principles of Islam, we don't generalize or paint the entire religions with one brush because we don't do that with any other religion. It seems like Islam has become that target that when someone does something and they supposed to profess belief in Islam, then the whole religion gets a bad rap. We need to educate ourselves more to be able to differentiate between that particular person's behavior and accepting personal responsibilities for those acts, no matter what they may be, as opposed to demonizing an entire religion. I'm here to support these brothers. It's a lot of things that I have been able to do within my own community. I've been very effective in the anti-violence movement, whether it's working with gangs. I think Brother Haqq made a very important point about the criminal justice models that we use. Currently, we use 3 models: deterrence, incapacitate, and deterrence. And either you fit in one of those boxes or you don't. It's no integrated model that comes out of criminal justice that we are currently using, but we should have a more integrated model, because there's different individuals in different circumstances that we need to evaluate individuals in order to appropriately assess those individuals. And given the political climate that we are in now, as we all know, we have a lot of work to do as individuals. And I think the brother had said it earlier, that we should be ambassadors to go out, because many of us have Muslim neighbors, and we need to debunk a lot of these stereotypes that are out there, because at some point they take on a life of their own, or people think that they are the truth, and a half-truth is disguised as a truth, does more damage than the actual truth itself. And they say the worst thing that you can do to the truth is stretch it. So I just wanted to give a few words, because I know we're strapped for time, and I want to make sure that this important dialogue continues. Thank you. As-salamu alaykum.
Thank you, Brother Bilal. Now we're going to hand it over to Ibrahim. Aziz, he's going to share a few words, experience.
Our honored guest, often when we discuss terrorism, extremism, radicalization, it's done in a very impersonal manner. We use terms such as FTFs, foreign terrorist fighters, FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, or HVEs, homegrown violent extremism. However, there is no one reason or one cause why someone becomes lost to extremism. There's no one size fits all. The desire to connect, to be accepted, to be part of a unified body is something that is a way that we define ourselves. What I'm asking us all here to consider is that in some cases, these acronyms, our lack of nuance when discussing this sensitive topic, and the overgeneralization can be dehumanizing and can in turn lead to a blanket miscategorization and labeling of an entire group, Muslims. My name is Ibrahim Aziz. My brother Jalil Aziz was charged in December 2015 with providing material support to ISIL. I can still remember the frantic phone call from my grandmother, we call her Yaya. During the call, she could hardly speak. I could hardly make out her words. I'm trying to get her to calm down and explain to me, hoping she's overreacting to something very minor. Yaya, I can't understand you. Yaya, please calm down. What are you trying to say to me? After about 3 minutes or so of her trying to get her to calm down, I'm finally able to make out what she's saying. They took Jalil. Who took Jalil? I think the FBI. Jalil? My little brother? It must be some kind of mistake. See, the house my sister and I grew up in had its share of problems. It was riddled with undiagnosed mental health problems. My parents had a unique view of the world. They would say, it's very dangerous out there. Don't trust people. Don't trust your friends. In fact, it's probably better not to have any friends at all. For the majority of my early childhood, we could neither visit friends nor have friends over at our house. However, my sister and I, we had each other. We went to public school. We were exposed to other individuals and children. We had my grandmother, aunts, and uncles. And as I got older, I found comfort amongst the larger Muslim community. After I moved out on my own, I had encountered tremendous difficulty adjusting to life. The real world was nothing that was described when I was growing up, and I was unprepared. I could work, I could provide for myself. It wasn't about income, but I didn't know who I was. And I lacked self-identity, let alone a positive self-image. There was an older Muslim social worker in our community, and he was the first to suggest that I receive professional help. It took about 10 years before I could realistically say that I liked who I was, that I felt good about who I was and who I am. My little brother didn't attend public school as I did. My little brother was not allowed to communicate or be with my sister and I. He wasn't allowed to interact with his aunts and uncles. My little brother had no friends, and he was intentionally ostracized and sequestered from everyone. And while I can't discuss the details of the case, I can tell you he was isolated. How do I know he was isolated? Because I felt isolated. I can tell you he felt alone. How do you know he felt alone? Because I felt alone growing up. And his case is more severe than my own. And I can tell you that I was searching for acceptance. And so I know he was searching for acceptance. On rare occasions, when I was allowed to interact with him and meet him, he was conversationally behind, inappropriately shy. I'm his brother, withdrawn. When he was around 17, talking to him was, you could equate to talking to a 10-year-old. He was socially behind. When my family and I went to see him for the first court hearing, it was my grandmother, Yaya, aunts and uncles, parents, and we were photographed by the local newspaper as we were leaving the courthouse. And the comments on the photo of that news article was, who are they? Are they Muslim too? We should kill them all. And mind you, in this picture is an 85-year-old woman in a wheelchair. And this is the example of the dehumanizing effect that I spoke about earlier. My little brother was isolated by his family, and in that isolation, he looked for acceptance. And in that searching for acceptance, he was targeted. Aziz, my little brother is not an anomaly. There are many people out there looking for acceptance. And now we have a group or groups that say, we'll accept you with all your imperfections. All you have to do is fill in the blank. Mental health challenges, isolation, yearning to be loved and accepted can be a catalyst and a precursor to violent ideology. It breaks my heart that my little brother has gone from living in one cage to now another. These nuanced details are left out of our daily terrorism conversation. And as we as a country look forward and look for solutions, there can be no one-size-fits-all. And my little brother needs help. My little brother needed help, and not the kind of help that a 6x8 cell provides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for sharing such a personal story, and we really do appreciate you sharing that. That's part of breaking down the stigma of mental health. And so without further ado, just to our time, because of our time constraints, we will start with Brother Mohamed, Hussein, if you would mind.
I think I need excuse me. I think I need a moment after hearing that story.
It was emotional. It was.
So, first off, I'd like to begin on behalf of the TAM group to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to join us. I know it's been a long day. We started at 10 a.m. Joining us in person, joining us online in what we feel is a really relevant, pertinent, and essential conversation. And that is how to effectively challenge extremism. It's something which is near and dear to my heart, and something that really impacts the lives of each and every one of us here. I'd also like to thank the Newseum for affording us this venue, and the Religious Freedom Center specifically for affording me the opportunity to be a student and to really study and dig deeper into the intersection of religious, civic, and legal discourse as it relates to the First Amendment. I myself am the executive director of an organization called SAFE, the Somali American Youth Foundation. I am a second-generation Somali American, the son of Somali immigrants, someone who is considered a community leader, especially in the Somali community. And what I'd like to talk about in these brief moments is radicalization in the Somali community, radicalization with Somali youth, and some of the many factors that do contribute to this radicalization. As you've heard time and time again, It's not just one thing. There are many different issues and factors that do contribute to radicalization. We just heard the story of Ibrahim and his brother, the isolation, the social awkwardness, the inability to converse even with family members. And before I begin, I'd like to just give a brief background about the Somali community, the Somali American community. There are, as many of you may know, there are hundreds of thousands of Somali Americans living in the US, and they are concentrated in certain pockets. The Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota being one of them, Columbus, Ohio, Seattle, Washington, just to name a few. And in the past 15 years or so, there's been well over 100,000 immigrants, refugees, who have been admitted into the US. And the Somali population in the US, the Somali American population, is different in this sense. There are some immigrant populations which are relatively new, who've been in the States for 10 or 15 years or less. And some Somali communities, like the community here in the DC metro area, the community in San Diego and others, who've been around for 40 plus years. So it goes without saying that radicalization, even in these Somali American communities, and the factors that do contribute to radicalization are going to be different. When you think about the Somali community, when you think about Somali youth, you think, if you watch the news, you hear Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda affiliate between 2007 and 2012, over 40 young Somali Americans, including 2 or more girls, young girls, went overseas through legal or illegal means to go fight and join these terrorist networks. You also may hear acts of terror here at home in the US. You might have heard about the recent 2016 shooting at the Ohio State University, where nearly a dozen people were shot and injured. You may have heard about the stabbing in St. Cloud, Minneapolis, where the assailant stabbed over a dozen people before he was shot and killed. You may have heard about the young man in Portland, Oregon, who had the intention of detonating a bomb at a holiday tree lighting ceremony before he was caught, and thankfully nobody was injured. But in this particular situation, his family actually spoke to the FBI about some intuition or some worry that they had or some fear that they had that their young son was being radicalized. So this kind of goes back to the issue that's been reiterated, especially in the first panel, about that there has to be a level of trust between the government or the organizations and the communities that they serve. Without that, you may have a situation like this young man, whose family now may feel that their son was, after they informed law enforcement, that their son was now illegally entrapped. So there are many factors that contribute to radicalization in the Somali community, particularly Somali youth. Many of these factors are socioeconomic, have nothing to do with religion. Studies will show you that there is no relation between religiosity and an uptick in extremism. There are other factors, other external factors, which contribute to this. It could be poverty, lack of housing, poor education, crime, drugs, gangs. There's one interesting study that actually says between 2007 and 2009, there were around 20 Somali youth who went overseas to go join Al-Shabaab. At the same time, in the Twin Cities, 11 young Somalis were killed in gang violence. And I think this goes back to part of the TAM approach and part of Dr. Baker's street approach, where you see kind of this correlation between gang violence and extremism. And if you speak with community members, radicalization to them is just one of the many issues that is concerning to them. Isolation is another issue. Isolation is another issue which, whether it be self-isolation or even community isolation, which may enable a platform where radicalization can thrive. But the focus here is mental health, so I'll stick to that. Mental health in the Somali community has been stigmatized for a very long time. Somalia is a Muslim majority country, but over 99% of Somalis are Muslim. And for a very long time, if you were to bring up this issue of mental health, a person being depressed, or a person even being stressed out, you'd be told that you're possessed. You're possessed by demons. You need to go recite more Quran. You need to go pray in the mosque. There's something else that's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your mental health. That's not an issue. It's not surprising that young kids will go to their parents and say, I'm feeling stressed out. And they'll say, there's no such thing as stress. So for a very long time, due to lack of education, even lack of correct Islamic education, because again, Islamically speaking, Islam does not say anything negative about mental health. It's something which is important, something which is pertinent, and we treat it just like we treat our physical health. We take care of it, we maintain it, we take the proper steps to ensure that that part of ourselves remains healthy. So, thankfully, over time, as the education barrier, the language barrier, the cultural barrier has eroded over time, the Somali community has been more proactive in discussing these issues. And just as recent as June, this past June, there was a conference at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work in conjunction with the Somali Mental Health Network to start to discuss some of these problems. And what are some of the things that first generation, second generation, and now even third generation Somali Americans are facing? Many Somalis, especially those who immigrated in the past 20 years, were fleeing, 20, 25 years, were fleeing from civil war. Going from refugee camp to refugee camp, just waiting for that day that you get that phone call or that letter that, your application has been accepted and you and your family are now safe. And you leave with a heavy heart knowing that you've left the life that you built, the wealth that you built, the homes that you own, the degrees that you've obtained, you've left all that behind in pursuit of a safer life and a better future for your children. So PTSD is something that's common in the Somali community. But again, it was something that was not addressed. I believe it's the Journal of the American Medical Association that says PTSD in refugees can range from anywhere from 4 to 86%. And depression can range anywhere from 5 to 31%. So this is a real issue. It is a true issue. My generation, second generation, Somali Americans may not have faced this. But they grow up in a household where these issues are not addressed. Where you don't talk about depression, you don't talk about stress, you don't talk about PTSD, you don't talk about any of these things. And because of that, there is an intergenerational transfer of trauma. And now, you as a second generation or even a third generation Somali American may start to take on the trauma of your parents. Because they never got any closure on those issues. They never got treated. They never even talked about it. Not even with their children. So thankfully things are going, in the Somali community are going in a better direction, but some of these numbers just kind of highlight that this is a real issue, and not just an issue that's going to go away anytime soon. Because again, you have that transfer from generation to generation. Many young people who've been radicalized are second generation. May have never seen Somali a day in their life. May not even speak Somali. But some of these factors here may contribute to them, becoming vulnerable and not having anybody to talk to about these issues. This isolation, coupled with these mental health issues, makes them really vulnerable for those who choose to exploit them. There's several organizations, some that have been established in the past 10 to 15 years to try and discuss some of these issues, or even deter Somali youth from being radicalized. And again, I say this Somali youth because that's where I've spent a lot of my time and a lot of my focus, but I have served as a youth director in organizations where the Somalis made up less than 5% in the community. But these issues are not specific just to the Somali community. I've seen issues very similar to the issue that Ibrahim just spoke about with his brother, where I was the youth director in a community, and there was a young person who was being charged with providing material support to ISIS. And he lived in the same city at the organization where I was the youth director, but he'd never come to the mosque. And because I didn't live in that city, I've never seen him a day in my life. And I just heard about him on the news. So again, I'm trying to reiterate that point, that the radicalization does not actually happen in the mosque, in the masajid. I heard about this young person on the news, and almost none of the youth who were in our youth group knew who he was. And those who had met him at summer camps and things like that in the past said he was very isolated, very to himself, didn't used to come out much, and things of this sort. So I'd like to conclude by saying that I think it is important that we do take a holistic approach to de-radicalization, that the professionals, be it in Islamic theology or mental health or corrections, are put in positions to de-radicalize. And these people have to really be people that are trusted by the community. Because this is, again, TAM is a grassroots effort. And you can't have a grassroots effort without having the community involved and the community engaged and having community trust. And I hope that the experts like Dr. Baker and Mujajid and Dr. White and all the other experts that you've seen today on the panel are empowered and put in a position to help eradicate and de-radicalize not only in the Somali community, but in the Muslim community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohamed, for that very informative talk. Just for the sake of time, we'll keep it moving. Also, just a reminder, any questions that you may have, please write them on the cards. Next we have Dr. Baker, who's the trooper here. He's been here since the beginning.
We're getting to know him
Hopefully
real
he's
well.
got enough steam to keep it rolling.
I don't know if because you lot like me or dislike me that you've got me going on to the truth. Again, what I'm going to do is refer to earlier frameworks. I think it's necessary to show a common theme and thread and the interconnectivity with the frameworks and the holistic nature in which TAM and we need to work. You've got a very personal story from Ibrahim. There was a case similar to that in the UK of a white convert, Asperger's syndrome, the same thing, isolated in Exeter, where I graduated with my PhD. And I won't go into detail, but it mirrors what Ibrahim has said. But however, we've spoken looking outwardly to, again, government agencies, social work agencies. There's a sense of denial as well amongst Muslim communities as to the problems that are happening to our families and our children. And too often we hear, when it's too late, our child was a good child, we didn't realise, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. We're not saying we should spy on them with regards to social media, but where is that parental engagement? Where is that parental responsibility? Where is it that we've given a space for our children and those young in the community to articulate their thoughts, even if wrong? And that needs to happen, because what we're finding is, we were youth when I wasn't a Muslim. When I gravitated from speaking to my parents, I became part of a gang. When you've got protagonists, and you've got to understand this, the protagonists are similar to those, I'm not going to say like the military, totally different, but they look for foot soldiers. Mm-hmm. They look for those. We heard about academic intelligence or illiteracy, levels of illiteracy. There's also emotional intelligence. And you'll find that a number of these individuals who are susceptible to violent extremism are emotionally illiterate. We did have a demo which we were going to show you of one of the deconstructs that we did, and it wasn't, don't worry, no heads being beheaded and things like that, but to show their propaganda, a martyrdom video. And I remember when I showed that to a set of police officers that I was training in the UK, I showed that, about a minute of it, they heard the martyrdom, the rhetoric, and I asked them, you've got 5 minutes, discuss amongst yourselves, how would you address this propaganda video with some vulnerable youth? And they were honest enough to admit, one of them put his hand up and was shaking his head. He said, I was convinced by the narrative. I was actually convinced by what, I don't know, how would you do it? And then I took them through a process that we go through of deconstruct, of every video that we actually look at. The point is, we're doing that when at a more rudimentary stage, we should be engaging with the youth regularly within the mosques. The mosque shouldn't just become places of worship. If we are going to really engage, we should be having surgeries in there where we've got social workers, academics coming in, engaging with the youth, safe spaces in this way. And I'll go back to that 4-stage model that I developed in my PhD from the youthful, the founding youthful, adult and mature phase. And I want to give you you saw that I gave a more detailed model. And I want to show you the stages that we need to bring these youth through to help them nurture themselves. And the first phase, let's look at it, data. That comes about through research, creation, and gathering and discovery. That's the stages that they're at. Everything's exciting, they're researching, they're gathering information, but they don't know how to process that information. Sometimes it's too much for them. A 16-year-old looking at ISIS videos and beheadings, really? He might want to be macho and say, look at that. But us sitting here now, we know that some of us won't do that. Some of us won't even look at those videos. Because psychologically, we're at a stage that we know the trauma it will cause by just watching. A child doesn't know that. Why do we have parental guidance on movies and Certificate X on movies? But what, we have Universal on ISIS videos? Because we don't temper what our children are doing and what the youth are doing. So they're at that excited stage of research, exploration, creation, looking at gathering information. The next stage is quite idealistic. The youthful phase that we're talking about. It's idealistic. Now they've got information. They're trying to place it in a discernible context, but it's abstract. They're hearing things from a different land, and they're trying to say, we can practice Islam in the way that they're telling us in the societies we come from. Very difficult. They're not mature enough to contextualize, process, take out some of the things that are non-practicable in the Western society as opposed to that which can be practiced. Okay? So data, the earlier stage, when the founding stage, is turned into information and it's presented. This is what the protagonists do. But we want to move them to the next stage, educationally and psychologically. knowledge. Remember, there's the adult phase, the third stage that we're moving along. That's the knowledgeable phase. It has the complexity of experience, which comes about by seeing it from different perspectives. This is why training and education is difficult. One cannot count on one person's knowledge transferring to another. Knowledge is built from scratch by the learner through experience. Information is static, but knowledge is dynamic as it lives within us. That's at the adult stage. And I'm drawing to conclusion. Now, we must all be tired. I'm shattered, I can tell you that much. We move to the final stage, which is the mature phase, the phase that we all want to get to. And listen to the description here. This is when wisdom is acquired. Wisdom is the ultimate level of understanding. As with knowledge, wisdom operates within us. We can share our experiences that create the building blocks for wisdom. However, it needs to be communicated with even more understanding of the personal context of our audience than with knowledge sharing. And I'll conclude on this part here of this particular summary. Data and information, the first two stages, deal with the past. They are based on the gathering of facts and adding context, which they're not able to do. We need to help them do that at those early formative stages. Knowledge deals with the present. We're moving to the adult phase now. It becomes a part of us and enables us to perform. However, when we gain wisdom, the mature stage, we start dealing with the future as we are now able to vision and design for what will be rather than for what is or was. We need to move our children, our youth, ourselves through this process. Statutory bodies that are here, you need to work with us on that. And I'll conclude, if we choose not to, I've already mentioned to you what we're looking at the grassroots. We know some that have returned from Syria and Iraq. We know in the UK, we know some of them. We're in touch with some of them. Some of them are lying way below the radar. Have they come back like in the days of Bosnia? When they came back, some of my colleagues came back and they weren't extreme. They appreciated the values of the society they returned to. This was during the Balkans conflict in the 90s. Those coming back from Iraq and Syria have no appreciation. They hate our way of life. I say our, including Muslims. Some of the Muslim communities here and in the UK continue to be insular, inward-looking. Social conservatism to an extent where they won't engage and participate in society. Those of us who are converts, we need to be conduits between the wider non-Muslim society and the Muslim society. We need to be bridges because we've got our foot in one door simply by the virtue of our non-Muslim relatives and our familiarity with the society that we converted from. And also because of our familiarity with the community, the Muslim communities that we are now engaging with and interfacing with. Is that a cause for psychological issues and trauma? No. What we need to do is embrace the duality of our identities as Muslim, in this case Americans. There's a duality of identities which are complementary. And until that message comes about from those in government and not point or target the Muslim communities as suspect communities, until that comes from within the Muslim communities so the youth can see the wider engagement, the opportunities that are there for non-Muslims are also there for them. Yeah, there are different nuances. We all have different values, just like the Christians and the Jewish faiths. But if we're not doing that, you're going to continue to see psychological issues bubbling at the surface and only coming out when it's too late in the hands of the extremists. Because what the extremists are doing, they've given, let's say, some will say utopian, let's call it dystopian, like those who went out to Iraq and Syria. They will tell you, forget every other identity you know, black, white, brown, whatever, Somali. You are part of the Ummah, the Muslim nation. They can't define it themselves as to what that actually means today, but they give you a dystopian vision and tell you to run with it. So then you begin to hate everything you've ever come to know and love. Because to love it means you're not Muslim enough. To hate it means you are a true Muslim. And therein lies the challenge, because that's a psychological quagmire in itself. For someone young who has not processed or moved through those 4 stages and hasn't been helped through those 4 stages by the wider Muslim community and wider society. I'll pass it over to Mujajid. I think he's got some key elements that he needs to bring to the table. Thank you for listening.
Again, I want to thank all of my fellow partners here. I would like to thank my partners here who gave us the opportunity to come to the Newseum. I would like to thank our partners who came outside of the TAM group to support us today. And I particularly use the word partners, because in this effort of creating change, the key word and key drive has to be partnership. But to get there, we need to know who each other really are. And I'm one of the young ones, as we probably can tell. And I might not have the same kuf that everyone has. But I think that it's very important that we talk about who we are. Because who we are as individuals, as a part of this TAM group, means something. Who we are is what can possibly create change. So to leave out who we are doing you and ourselves an injustice. So when we started, you started with, I think at this point, we all know our brother Abdul Haqq Baker is well known, not just here, but well known worldwide. Has worked with the UN, has worked with his statutory partners, along with
government.
Along with at some point with our government. Then we have our Sheikh, Tahir Wyatt. It's important to know who he is, because the Muslims worldwide come in contact with this person. We know that Muslims travel to what we call making hijrah, or what we call making umrah. We know that the Muslims travel to make umrah, and when they go to umrah, they go to the land of Saudi Arabia, and they go to Mecca, and they go to Medina. And one of the things that they do when they go to Medina, they seek out our brother Tahir. They want to learn from him. And he's here with us. He's here with us. He's on the television. We can see him live. We can ask him questions. And this is one of our scholars in Islam. This is not a small thing. So when we talk about creating change, you're talking about these two as leaders. So with their leadership, from an ideological standpoint, from an experience standpoint, how does it get better? We have many people that come to us as experts, yet the actual hands-on experience is null and void. It doesn't exist. They read a book, they talk to this one and that one, but these people have hands-on experience. And then we go on. We have our brother Joe Bradford. We have our brother Akil Ingram. Both who are known throughout our country. These brothers are known within and without. These other two, Joe Bradford and Akil Ingram, we search them out here in the U.S. These are who the Muslims search out to learn from, to take from. This is who helps to create that positive ideology. We have them here. We are learning from them. And then you got myself and Mohamed. right? We're the young ones. But we bring something to the table. We bring something to the table because we are those individuals on the ground who are directly connected to those individuals we're talking to. The individuals we worry about. Those youth. Those not so youth. Those adults who have youthful thoughts. We touch them every day. I have my phone in my hand, and I usually do, because in my community, when there's a crisis, I'm usually being called. We had our state delegate, Bilal Ali. When there's a crisis in my community, mind you, I didn't say with the Muslims. I didn't say with the Muslims. In our community, when there's a crisis, whether it's Muslim or not, we're called because of what we do for the community as a whole, not just for the Muslims. So what I do, yes, by practice, I am a mental health clinician. I help people deal with problems. I run an organization, a mental health clinic called K.E.Y.S Development. I have therapists, advocates, mentors who take my direction to create change. In the schools with youth, outside of the schools with families, in the penal system. We direct that. And it's not directed towards Muslims. And we have a heck of a rate of success, to the point that I've been appointed currently to the mayor's team that deals with youth development and safety, not for Muslims, for everyone. The mayor of Baltimore, my mayor, Catherine Pugh. I'm an advisor to several state delegates. I'm an advisor to several city council members when it comes to issue of violence in the community. So who better to talk to about violence within individuals who happen to be Muslim than one who has the expertise of dealing with violence? There's two-pronged approach that we have to accept. That some individuals are radicalized due to faulty understandings of Islam. And there's another side that we have to get a grasp on. There's this side that individuals are socially affected negatively, and our brother Ibrahim gave us an example. So in this, Muslims, I'll get to this piece, that Muslims are now the citizens of our country who have dual citizenship. But they weren't always the persons with dual citizenship. This isn't something new to our country. And this isn't something new to African Americans. Because African Americans have a history of dual citizenship in our country. That we made effort to fight. That we made effort to resolve. That we made effort to stop individuals from becoming radicalized and join in with their fellow brothers and sisters as Americans. African Americans have accomplished that. It took time. But mind you, there was a reason. But for me, I have to create change. So as Tam, what you hear is this continuum of service that we start here and we can work our way down. And my job is to put it where the goats can get it. I got to make sure that we as a group understand what TAM does and how we do it. So that's what I intend to do. Y'all got to excuse me, I use notes because I kind of develop what I want to talk about based on hearing the questions, what's being said and what's not being said. So our brother talked about catching individuals at an earlier stage. Our goal is not to allow individuals to become radicalized. We don't want this to happen. We can stop it. We, the individuals, we can stop it. Because we are directly in those communities and we have the same experiences that they have. So when you ask someone who studied, read a book, talked to someone about why someone became radicalized, they might answer your question. They might talk about it. But when you talk to someone whose name is Mujajid, we all know Mujahideen, we know the term, whose name is Mujahid Mohamed, they know what it feels like. A Mujahid Mohamed who grew up going to Muslim schools, who grew up with dual citizenship, and sometimes it was double dual citizenship, who every time that I fly, I expect and somewhat understand why I'm going to get a special check. And I understand that. But things, and I'll say radical things, tend to happen, even to us as Muslims. So recently, just this summer, I flew, and I won't state the airport, out of respect, but I flew down south to a smaller area. And when I came in, no problem. But when I was leaving this airport, coming back to the Baltimore, Washington area, I was going through the checkpoint, and my wife went through. And I was carrying my, at the time, maybe 15-month-old son. And I was stopped. I wasn't allowed to go through. Nah, we got to check you out. And I said, okay, no problem. Let me give my wife the baby. And I was not allowed to pass my wife, my child. Now, I consider myself a very, civilized, calm-mannered person. But when I have my child in my hand, and you stop me from passing my child over to my wife, now you have crossed the line, and I am angry. The difference between me acting on that anger and someone else acting on that anger is called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is having two conflicting beliefs or two conflicting thoughts. I'll give you an example. It probably relates to a lot of us. So one example would be an individual who speeds, especially if you speed in D.C. I'm going to tell you, don't do it. It's not worth it. But an individual who speeds, who knows, one, I shouldn't speed, I'm going to get a ticket. And they do it anyway. And when they get that ticket, they literally feel bad. You can feel it. Like, I knew I shouldn't have. I knew it was a camera somewhere coming up. You actually feel it even though you know that you shouldn't do it. But yet, you validate your reasons for doing it. I was running late. I had to get there. Da-da-da, da-da-da. Another example. Some of us see individuals on the street, and they ask for money. and we don't give it to him. And some of us feel bad about it. Like, man, maybe he was real. He wasn't faking. Maybe he needed that dollar. Or I had a water in the car, I could have gave him that. And then after that, we go ahead and the next person and we give him something. That feeling at that time is cognitive dissonance. You have a belief and a thought and they don't agree with one another and you don't know what to do. As Muslims, some Muslims live a large portion of their life in that period and it's stressful. And when I say cognitive dissonance, I am talking about a Muslim who is not okay being Muslim. And this is what we need to worry about. This is the person who is vulnerable to being radicalized. Because they live in a place where I know I'm Muslim and I want to grow my beard, or I know I'm Muslim and I'm at work and I want to pray, but if I do this and this and this will happen, bad things will happen. And I'm not okay with losing my job, and I'm not okay with not working, and because of that, I don't do it. But yet I feel bad because I want to do it. And I build up this frustration for who? I build up this frustration for everyone who does not agree or I don't think agrees with me being Muslim. And I also build up a hatred for myself. And when I start hating myself for not doing the things that I know I should be doing, I fall into this place of cognitive dissonance and keep me away from people who will turn me the wrong way and release that energy out. That's what we at TAM are targeting. We're targeting that group. We're targeting the group affected by that, and that's where the mental health piece lies. PTSD is real. Depression is real. But cognitive dissonance, we all feel it. We're all susceptible to it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mujahid. That was real powerful. I guess we'll move on to the question and answer session, just due to time. One of the questioners, and this goes for anybody who would like to take the question, does the radicalization of women follow the same general patterns as that of men? How does the family dynamic inform the women's radicalization?
It takes on a similar path to a certain extent. And one of the things that we see is that, especially in the West, in the UK, for example, we see that the process for the women is a lot more intense as the house builders, as the mothers of the children, and the isolation that they actually have. You'll find that from what we've done from the research perspective, and when I was looking at my research, that because they are in the home, because they are more isolated, because they are more below the radar, their radicalization, the extent to which they can be radicalized, can be very drastic. And if we want evidence of that, what we saw in the UK was unprecedented with the amount of young ladies who went over to Syria to join the Islamic State. You all would have seen the images of the 3 young ladies going over. You would have seen and heard of the stories of families of 12 going over. And those who were pushing and driving these individuals to go across were women. And then we saw the social media between these women, those who had arrived in Syria, communicating otherwise. I'll speak about a specific case that I had. A colleague, a British colleague of mine said, can I pass someone on to you? He's in a real state at the moment. He was from one of the West Indian islands. And he contacted me and told me that his ex-wife was married to an individual, and his daughter of 12 years old used to contact him regularly every week. And she asked him in December of, not last year, the year before, what he thought of Syria and travelling to Syria. And he wondered why she'd asked that, and he said, that's crazy. The extremists there, what are you talking about? You're talking nonsense. And her response was to show upset with her father, which worried him. The contact became less frequent, and she contacted him one more time, and then that was it. He found out after the periodic contact had broken, he contacted his colleagues, his family, even his ex-wife's parents, and they said they've gone. He said, where have they gone? With the husband. They'd left 2 of the children from the stepfather with the ex-wife, and they'd taken his daughter. And they were en route to Syria. Now, he asked me to do what I could. I spoke to colleagues and contacts. We found out they went from the West Indies to Guyana, South America, where my mother's from, back to the UK, stopped in the UK. They went and performed Umrah, and then they moved from Umrah to Turkey, and then from Turkey they got into Syria. And I've still got the voice recording that he sent to me. He sent me a voice clip of his daughter. And I've written about it. If you look at one of my articles on the website, I transcribed some of what she said. And she actually said, Abby, we're here now. I know that you were going to be upset if I told you that I was getting here, but it's well cool here. They give us Pepsi. As you know, they say Pepsi, Bebsi, because they don't pronounce the P. It's really peaceful here. We really love it. And you could hear the mother in the background schooling her daughter to speak. Tell your dad, I love him, love you. Abby, I love you. And that's the last he heard from her. So we not only saw the mother and that female network driving others to travel and encouraging others to travel, but what worried us is the inculcation that started taking place amongst some of the children. The men assigned this task to their wives because they know their wives will be very effective in propagating that. You've got women, you saw there were single men in Syria, British, and you had women encouraging them, saying this is the peak of heroism, this is the peak of being a Mujajid, this is the peak of being a Muslim. We will come and marry you. So it was romanticized. So the process of women, females, is one that we have to take very, very seriously, because it will cascade to their children as well. You're here, and I'll conclude on this point, I'm talking still about Syria, that one of the more extreme and brutal brigades was that of the women from the West, British women. And they would parade and make sure the women, Syrian women, the indigenous people of that land, were wearing the niqab, not showing the eyes except one eye, not showing the legs or socks, not coming out at a particular timing and everything. It was the British women who had gone over and had formed this brigade. Why? Let's go back to my 4-stage model. Because they were either at the founding or youthful idealistic stage where their extremism was allowed to proliferate. So I hope I've answered that. The evidence is there. You can just go and Google and look at the amount of women, young ladies, and the networks of those young ladies. I'm not saying it's here in the American experience. I think the American Muslims are more grounded to an extent, if I can say that, from what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing. But I can't talk about that. That's not my area of speciality. But in the UK, that is what has happened.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. This is regarding being able to inform or impact at the policy level. Policymakers, particularly white American policymakers, what are main fundamentals we could or should provide? Anyone want to do this? How can we impact at the...
Sure. So I think that what we're doing right now is just that. We are making it clear that there are professionals who have the ability, have the experience, the wherewithal, and the acceptance. That's the big word. Acceptance from the Muslim community from the Muslim community to be able to advise. So the tough thing with regards to advising our political community is that everybody wants to advise them. And they have a tough job with recognizing who to listen to and who to tune out, because everybody's pulling at their coattail. But here today, we see that there is a group who has those core needs that we need to be able to advise. So how do we do that? I'm raising my hand. I have cards. The other brothers have cards. Get them. Get our information and reach out to us. TAM is readily available to come to you personally and support in changing our legislation to assure that it makes sense with regards to tackling radicalization here in the States.
And if I can just add, if policymakers and all of you ask, you've seen we've put the framework up on the crop solutions. If policymakers and others ask, what does TAM bring to the table? We bring the damn table.
So, appreciate it. So I didn't see that they put it up. So I'm actually going to take this time real quick to run through our crop solutions, okay? So what this is really an outline of what we really do. So we talked about, we did a lot of, talking. We understand that, okay, there is some expertise here, but how do you actually actualize it? So really quick, I'm going to run through this, and we're going to keep it moving with our questions. But in our first phase, we intend to develop a internet and social media outreach program. What this does, because we've heard over and over, and most of us know, that majority of radicalization happens over the internet. That people can type in something and there's someone waiting out there to tell them the wrong thing and steer them the wrong way. So we have to start with saying, okay, it's important to tackle this and work with our partners to, when people type in certain things and then looking at certain things, that they are transferred over to someone who's going to give them something correct. Not just anybody, but someone who has the ability to deal with them on an ideological level and on a behavioral level, in someone who they respect. So I know that when most Muslims type in something and they get something else and Sheikh Tahir pops up, whoa, okay, I gotta listen. That's really important to be able to have that. Our second step is a 1-800 number and a extremist hotline. This is important because often there are a lot of signs, there are a lot of symptoms that can be seen. And too often we ignore them, not because we don't care, because we don't know what to do with them. Generally, as people, as parents, we see certain things and sometimes we don't know what to do with it. It's a phase. They're going through, they'll get out of it. I hear the same thing with parents with regards to their children who are being radicalized. They're going through something, they'll get out of it. What if you could call, as a parent, a 1-800 number to say, hey, I need help, what should I do? This is highly important because if this was active, there are hundreds of parents, if not thousands of parents, who would like to call someone, not the FBI, but they would like to call someone with the safety of knowing I'm not going to get in trouble for calling, and I'm not going to be on a watch list because my child looked at the wrong thing and I just want somebody to talk to him and straighten them up. This is our ability because I touch parents, I touch youth, and being in the community, I can make people aware of this and they'll use it. The TAM prison program. So we heard a little bit about, why it's important, but we actually have already completed a pilot program here in Washington, D.C. So we've already started that. The pilot program was a huge success, and we intend to continue and kind of scale that up. Our TAM podcast. Media is important. There needs to be a constant voice to deal with the constant voice that's out there making an attempt to radicalize, as I like to say, our babies. There needs to be a constant voice to deal with this. And having an actual podcast that people can tune into with names of who they know, they'll tend to listen. Our TAM treatment facility. Now, this is important because unfortunately, there are individuals, as Sheikh Tahir said, that the poison is going to touch. And that poison is dangerous. That poison is dangerous. Now, we know that we want to stop it before it ever gets to that point. But some individuals need to be, as in a treatment model, right? We're talking about mental health as in a treatment model. Some individuals can effectively be treated in the same environment in which they were impacted. So we have to have the ability to remove those individuals and put them in a different environment. And this is what this is what allows this to happen. Community outreach. We also heard Sheikh Tahir talk about there needs to be tens, if not hundreds, of people who are trained to go into communities and train parents, train community partners, our police departments. And I gotta say, in Baltimore, particularly in the Northwestern District, they do a great job at this. To train them on what those signs are, and when to call, and what to do, and be aware of all of the resources. Our refugee program. So this is something that we have, in essence, as individuals, already done. We heard our brother Mohamed Hussein talk about the Somali population. We know a lot come over as refugees. Radicalization and Extremist Research Center. Can you touch on this? Because you would be better to speak towards that.
Just in a nutshell, that will be a centre similar to the hotline, but more detailed, and it will be dealing with all kinds of radicalisation, where we will enlist the expertise at any given time for parents, schools, institutions to call in if they're concerned about any type of online or radical material that are being looked at. They can send that to this centre. We will then disseminate, deconstruct, and return the deconstruct response to you, and if need be, come and get involved or find a suitable trained partner with you to come and help in that. So that will be a hub that will be enlisting the expertise of various far-right extreme experts, counter-radicalization, religious extremist experts. So that's what this will actually be. 24/7, being able to contact or email or send material that you're concerned about. And it will be at the different stratas. As we said, parents contacting, seeing that they found some links or information on the website, schools, colleges, universities, police, intelligence services at various levels.
Okay, and 9 is what brought us here. And we have a couple of minutes left, so we're going to move right along.
No.
All right, yeah, next question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so the TAM Legal and Legislative Division. All right, so of course this question came up, but this is something that's in the plan. This is something that we have to tackle. That our policies have to make sense. We can't have policies that further push people into radicalization. Those policies don't make sense. And when those policies aren't working, we have to do something about it. So having those advocates to be able to work with our legislators it has to happen. It has to happen. So this is part of our third phase, but in essence, this is our framework. This is what we come to bring you. This is what we are saying, that this is how we're going to actualize a lot of the theory, belief, and know-how. So, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mujahid. We are coming to the end of our session here, so I would really like to thank all of our panelists for volunteering their time and really informing us on the program. And also I'd like to thank actually, I'll pass the mic to...
Go.
Oh, and as far as the questions, we haven't got to all the questions, so we'll try to address those questions later.
Let me just also, on behalf of TAM, thank everyone for their patience, because this has been a long day. I know we've been here since 8 o'clock. It started at 10, and so we started on time, and hopefully, God willing, we're going to end on time. It's supposed to end at 4, and it's now 30 seconds to 4. So let me just kind of do the final housekeeping items, if I may. One, those questions that we did not get to, and everybody asked some very good questions, but we couldn't answer all of them in the time allotted. So we will make every effort to post them on our website. And you've seen the, Twitter accounts and the logo. So, and even if in the bathroom, if you're washing your hands, you saw the TAM logo on the TAM website. And so we really thank Nate and his team. When I met the president this morning of the Freedom Center, and I told him that I was very impressed on the professionalism, because we've been working at this for about 2 years with Nate and his team to make this effort a success. And as we said before, when we first started in the morning session, we went to several entities and no one would give us the mic, but Nate gave us the mic. And as Dr. Baker said, we brought the damn table. So hopefully, inshallah, God willing, we're going to make every effort to make what we said a reality. It's going to take time, but we have the ingredients and the team and the professional know-how to get this done. There's things that have already been in the works. People have already called us. Even I got a text from Senator Muse, who said he had spoken to the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor when he left here. He was totally impressed what he saw, and he wants us to kind of meet with them in the next 30 days to talk about a pilot project. So hopefully that could be happening. And I think the main focus is to gear towards that's the low-hanging fruit, which is dealing with the youth who, as Mujahid said, are readily bombarded, are in trouble, and look at those urban centers, be it D.C. and Baltimore, in an area where we have the preponderance of the TAM members to kind of talk through that. But at the end of the day, we want to take, as Dr. Ridley said, we want to take this show on the road, because we know the prisons are in dire need of our assistance as well. And we want to debunk the issues of, homegrown terrorism emanating from the prisons, and also homegrown terrorism emanating from the Mujajid. And so with that, as I told you before, that's why I like to write things down, because I get quite loquacious. And I'm looking at Nate. Nate's giving me the sign. So I thank y'all very, very much. And again, thanks for the patience and listening to us. And may the peace of Allah be upon all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. Wrapping up the conversation here at the Newseum, the day-long conference on combating violent extremism. You can find all of the panels online in C-SPAN's video library, cspan.org. Just type extremism into the search bar. And tonight in primetime, join us when actor and filmmaker Rob Reiner sits down to talk with columnist David Fromm about threats to America.